Well, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. We just had a fantastic, brilliant panel of speakers. Gunnery, Pippa, Lucas and Paul. They gave us some great knowledge and insights in terms of connected packaging. We are now very privileged to have here with us today a renowned expert, Gregor Murray. You are Ecommerce Channel Development Director at Kellogg Company. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's great to be with you.
So I know you have a strong focus on sustainability. You're going to be talking about innovative projects and their potential impact. We're going to talk about packaging reuse, benefits of deposit return schemes, strategies, circular economy, lots and lots of things around new things that are coming. But before we do that, are you able to share with us an interesting fact that not many people know about you? Have you got any dark secrets you're willing to share with us?
I don't know about sharing dark secrets with you, but one thing I will tell you, quite relevant to this discussion, is that for 3 years I was an elected borough councillor in my community, and I led our community into declaring a climate emergency, and then I led all of the work that we were doing across our borough to become closer to carbon neutral. So 171,000 residents, about 72,000 households, leading everything that our council was doing in order to try and reduce our carbon footprint, from planting trees to increasing our recycling rate to building more sustainable energy grid and all sorts of other things as well, which is what helps me with a conversation like this, because I both work from a local authority perspective, but I also work with a lot of food manufacturers in the past on their sustainability initiatives as well.
Yes, it sounds like very well qualified, Gregor. So we know it's the key focus for this conversation, and there's various innovative and sustainable projects that you have worked on. What do you personally say that would be the most interesting? What do you think has maybe got the most impact, or that you found most intriguing that you've worked on?
Well, I mean, I think firstly, I should say that the food industry as a whole really got into sustainability a long time ago. So it's not a new agenda for the food industry. A lot of big manufacturers have been working for a long time on things like reducing their road miles, changing where they're sourcing and how they're sourcing their raw materials to make them more sustainable, working with producers and with farmers that make the raw materials that we require in order to produce the foods that people consume, to help them with more sustainable farming initiatives, to help them reduce carbon footprints. There's been a lot of initiatives around reducing packaging waste, reducing tonnages that have been used in packaging. Easter eggs used to be a really big user of packaging, and actually now they've managed to cut out more than 50% of the total packaging that they were using. I've seen big initiatives around removing plastics, non-essential plastics, of moving over to fully recycled plastic bottles, reusing glass bottles and things like that. There's been some absolutely fantastic initiatives with organizations like TerraCycle to really make packaging that never used to be recyclable now. TerraCycle have done some absolutely fantastic things with the likes of Colgate and others in the States, where they did recyclable. Toothpaste tubes never used to be recyclable, not easily recyclable, and so they did big collecting schemes, and they turned old toothpaste tubes into play pucks for kids. So they were able to repurpose and reuse lots of material. So there's been a lot of initiatives that have been led by manufacturers that have already filtered through into different things. In the community where I live, one of the initiatives that we did in partnership with a very large soft drink supplier is all of the curbstones that we replaced that line the side of the road. They used to be concrete. Concrete has a really big carbon footprint. And one of the things that they have been repurposed as is, going forward, all of them are now made from recycled plastic. They are just as strong as the concrete ones used to be. If they do get damaged, you can whip one out and replace it really easily. You can remold the old one. And it's a really great reuse of plastic that has already been recycled several times and has come to the end of its usable plastic life. One of the big challenges that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later on, is like from a local authority perspective. Local authorities recycle 50 to 55% of the total amount of waste that gets thrown away. But of the remaining, of your total waste, about 25% of it currently cannot be recycled, or there isn't a market for it to be recycled. And that is a real issue because manufacturers are still producing, thick black plastics. Black plastics, hard plastics are really, really difficult to recycle. And they're still coming into the waste stream over and over and over again. And so we've got to think kind of further back up the recycling scheme in order to be able to have it filtered through and make everything recycled. You asked me about an initiative that I was really excited by that, right? So as a counsellor, my absolute favourite, right? This is one of the best ideas I've ever heard. As a counsellor, I ran an event during COP26 for a whole load of local school kids, and we asked them for their ideas of what manufacturers should do to help improve recycling. And somebody said to me, well, it's really simple. All manufacturers should just use 3 different sizes of packaging. So there should be a small, a medium, and a large, and it should be consistent across all manufacturers. So if you produce in a box, there should be 3 different sizes. If you produce in a bottle, it should be 3 different sizes. They should all be consistent sizes. They should all be consistent weights. They should all be designed perfectly to fit through the supply chain, etc., and be recyclable. And not have loads of dead space around them, so you're not transporting lots of air, which produces a lot of carbon. And I just thought that was one of the best ideas that I'd ever heard. And I was saying in that room when he came up with it, I've sat in rooms with manufacturers for years talking about sustainability initiatives, really, really smart, hugely well-paid people, and nobody had come up with an idea that simple. And I love it. And I've taken it to as many manufacturers as I possibly can to say, look, guys, we could do something really cool here just by standardizing the size of packs. Because I've got this bottle in front of me, right? This is an Evian bottle. Other brands of water are available. But this is actually a really difficult shape to transport because it's not stable and there's loads of dead space around it. If it was a standardized bottle that was perfectly designed to be shipped without shipping a whole load of air around it, it would reduce the carbon footprint massively. It would be infinitely more sustainable, and it'd be much better for the environment.
Yeah, but that's pretty impactful. I mean, obviously, there's an awful lot of change that would need to happen, and of course, all of the brands would need to agree, and there would be a huge amount of change, and there would be impact there, and of course, the machine manufacturers and all the other things there. But it is a very, very nice idea that seems to make a lot of sense. Did that come from a child, though? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it came from a 14-year-old kid sat in a room about a mile away from where I'm sitting right now. And do you know what? The implementation of it is difficult. I completely accept the implementation of it is difficult. But actually, all manufacturers need to do is choose to do it.
Yeah.
And if they choose to do it, they will find a way, right? Yeah, back in the late 90s, early noughties, there was a lot of pressure on confectionery manufacturers around the whole lifestyle, obesity piece. And so all of the manufacturers just decided to get together. And in the UK, they created Change for Life, which is a wonderful program that helps people to live better, live healthier lifestyles. It includes themes around permissibility, so chocolate isn't actually bad for you. It needs to be in the right portion control, etc. So it talks about permissibility. Change for Life also was the thing that created Couch to 5K, which thousands of people around the UK have done and have lived healthier lifestyles as a result of it. It was just because the manufacturers chose to do it. Things like these types of initiatives, the standardized 3-pack sizes. I work for a cereal manufacturer, so it'd be 500 grams a kilo, 1.5 kilos, or 2 kilos, something along those lines. But standardized pack dimensions, whatever the volume you can fit into it. We could do it. We absolutely could do it because we're creating boxes. We're creating hundreds of thousands of boxes every single day that we're using to ship our products. We just have to choose to do it in a slightly different size. And yeah, it's going to take some reworking, but we could choose to do it. We've got other things that we've got to work on. We've got other pressures that are going on at the moment, but we could choose to do it.
mean, it's a huge impact, and of course it would probably wipe out quite a lot of competition in the packaging industry as well. So there's, you know, a lot of different politics, I think, that would be at play. But what about other challenges and limitation in terms of widespread reuse type strategies? You know, there's a lot of different ideas. That's one, a fantastic one. But there's a lot of different ideas out there. But it seems that there seems to be quite a lot of struggles in terms of implementing any of them effectively. You know, well, give me an answer there, and I'll carry on after.
Yeah, I mean, look, so refillables has become a massive topic of conversation. Yeah, and it's been around for a long time. You know, Waitrose were trialing it 15, 20 years ago. So it's not a new thing, right? There has been a massive growth in refillable and reusable shops in, you know, towns and cities all around the world. There are more and more places where people who choose to can go and buy their products refillable. And it has been great for smaller niche manufacturers. The problem for really big manufacturers, though, is that massive hoppers of product doesn't sit very well in our supply chain. You know, we have spent decades creating these fully optimized supply chains for products of certain sizes and shapes and weights and what have you. To then say, okay, we're now going to start shipping a 50, 80, 100 kilo hopper filled with cornflakes that somebody can go along and refill a tub from, and then take to a counter and be charged for the contents, even though I might go with a plastic tub, which only weighs a couple of, you know, maybe 20, 30 grams, but you might go with a glass jar. How do you determine the weight of the product that's inside it if you don't already know the weight of the item that is being put into? There's so many complexities around being able to do it. You know, Coca-Cola is a great example. You know, they have the siphons that they put into bars all of the time. You could do that in Tesco's or Carrefour or Esselunga tomorrow, but the infrastructure required to be able to do it on the scale that people would need from a supermarket doesn't exist at the moment. You know, we can all go and buy wine directly from a barrel. There are places in France where that's exactly what you do. But you try and put that into a supermarket setting, 10 barrels of wine take up the space of, you know, a range of 200 different varieties of wine. So you're taking away a huge amount of choice. So there's lots that could be done, but the infrastructure that surrounds it just isn't strong enough at the moment. And the supply chains have been optimized to fit the products that we've got at the moment. And most manufacturers, most big scale manufacturers, right now, it just doesn't sit within our supply chain. Now, you know, sustainability is a huge priority for every single manufacturer. Absolutely, of course it is. But we've got so many other pressures of what we're trying to update and evolve and improve to make a wholesale change to a supply chain that has been established for 60 or 70 or 80 years. It doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take a lot longer than most people would think, because our supply chain is set up to match Tesco's supply chain. Tesco's supply chain is set up to match what their stores need. Their stores are set up to match what their customers want. You have to have wholesale behavior change just to be able to make changes for things like refillables. So as much as I applaud it and I'd love to see more of it, actually we need to kind of think about the situation that we have right now and stop thinking about these idealistic ways of doing stuff. They're great ideals. We should be aiming for them, but actually the reality of the situation right now is this is our supply chain. How do we make it the most sustainable we can and then start evolving it into other things?
Yeah, well, there's the deposit return scheme.
Yeah.
So obviously we've got a little bit of a delay in Scotland, a little bit of a pushback. It seems like it's still going to happen, still going to roll out. What do you think? There's a lot of attention around it. What's your perspective on the benefits, everything concerned with the good old DRS?
I think the benefits of it are hugely obvious, right? You know, we reuse the packaging, brilliant. We want to be doing that. You know, systems like this have worked for a long time. You know, I still have a milkman. He comes round, he brings me milk in glass jars. Glass bottles, I put the old ones out, he takes them away, they get washed, they get reused. Brilliant. It works. It's part of the scheme. We used to have a glass deposit return scheme in Scotland. We had it all across the country until the 80s. I can remember taking the glass bottles back to the corner shop, and we used to call them glass checks in Glasgow. You'd get the money back in return for it. And then it kind of died away because manufacturers stopped delivering direct to the independent stores because of economies of scale. And so the ability to swap existing bottles for new bottles it's not there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges around the deposit return scheme, and the reasons why it keeps being delayed is because, firstly, the big supermarket chains don't want to be taking back the bottles.
Yeah.
They've got nowhere to keep them. They've worked as hard as is humanly possible to have the smallest warehouses that they can have.
Yeah.
And now you want them to start storing a whole load of empty plastic bottles. They don't want to do it. They will do it. But the other biggest problem with it is a behavioral piece, right?
Yeah.
There is no amount of money. I've seen the research, right? I used to work for a soft drinks company. I've seen the research. There is no amount of money that is relevant enough to consumers that you can add to the price of a bottle that would make people want to take it back.
Mm.
Yeah, 20p isn't significant enough. 50p isn't really significant enough. If you start adding €1 or €2 or €3, it will just stop people from buying in the first place. It's not going to drive the behavior change. And the biggest issue that I have with the deposit return scheme is that there was a much better idea that was put forward by the soft drinks companies in the UK, who had a conversation and said, right, consumers don't want this. There isn't amount of money that will make them want to bring it back. The supermarket chains don't want the bottles. So here's the idea. We'll put bottle return banks at schools. And kids can take the bottles back. We'll put 20p on the price. The money goes to the school. So the more the school, the more bottles that are taken back to the schools, the more money the school gets. So yes, it is a tax, but the bottles get recycled, which is great. It is the aim. 20p is not significant enough that it's going to damage people's shopping behavior, and the schools benefit. And the drinks companies put that forward as an idea, and it was rejected.
Really?
Now, I think that is a brilliant idea. Now, the argument against it was that some schools will benefit more than others, and you'll create this tiered system amongst schools. But I kind of think, do you know what?
But isn't that the
Who
point?
cares?
Yeah,
Schools need money.
Yeah.
And they can use it to pay for equipment or books or sports equipment or just their electricity bill, or take on another, but you would be encouraging children to drink soft drinks. They already drink them.
Yeah. But also
Let's be realistic.
Water comes in a bottle.
Exactly. But let's be realistic here, right? People consume soft drinks from plastic bottles. We have to find a solution to the bottle problem. The one that the soft drinks companies came up with, frankly, in my opinion, is much better than the scheme that is attempting to be implemented in Scotland. Has been delayed on so many occasions. The retailers don't want to do it. The manufacturers don't really want to do it in the guise that it's in. There was a much better way of doing it, and it's been rejected because it doesn't fit with the mold of what the old deposit return scheme was.
Yeah.
And I just think in a situation like this, we've got to think differently, and this is an opportunity to really think differently. And talking about thinking differently, right? One of the biggest causes of carbon emissions are fridges and air conditioning units. One of the biggest users of fridges are soft drinks companies, because people want chilled water, right? They want chilled soft drinks like Cokes and what have you. One of the biggest drivers that could impact the carbon emissions of every country around the world is, I don't know if you've seen it, if you look at a bottle or a can of Coke, one of the things it says on it is best served chilled. If those soft drinks companies could get together and decide and reformulate their products so that it's best served at room temperature, you could get rid of most of the fridges that exist in supermarkets and corner shops and quick service restaurants, etc., all around the world, and you could cut carbon emissions massively as a result. But that's a case of you've got to think really differently, think really outside of the box. And I hope that manufacturers will do that. Certainly within Kellogg, we have teams of people who are looking at ways that we can dramatically change what we're trying to do in order to be more sustainable. I know that most of the big manufacturers will as well, but we've got to make big changes like that.
Definitely, and something has to happen. I mean, we can't just keep talking about a deposit return system, but that never really happens anyway. So we just keep talking about it. I think that schools idea is fantastic. Yesterday we had somebody, Ryan from EPAC, and he was talking about, they sold different popcorns with different designs on each of the packets, each one representing one of the schools. And if you buy that one, then the popcorn would actually donate some of that money to that particular school. And again, that massively works there. Peter has just mentioned, he was one of our panelists yesterday. He's also just said at Plastic Bank, they do something similar with more than 100 schools in Indonesia and the Philippines, and it works really well. And they combine it with environmental education as well, which of course is really important, because if we can educate the children, then they can educate the parents. And we see that happening in a lot of places as well. And I think that just sounds like a perfect solution. I've never actually heard that was actually an idea that was suggested beforehand. So it seems to me pretty ludicrous that somebody's not kind of rethinking about that. We've got an anonymous attendee saying, actually, if DRS does get launched, has the impact on local authority collections been considered? Surely splitting the recovery streams will drive inefficiencies.
So the local authorities would no longer be responsible for collecting that plastic. Actually, local authorities, they make money from recycling. So I hate to get technical, but for 171,000 people, it costs the council somewhere in the region of about 3.8 to 4.2 million pounds a year just to collect your waste. They sell cardboard and plastic and glass and other such things to be recycled, and the money that comes back in from that offsets that cost of collection to the tune of somewhere in the region of about 50% for most local authorities. It varies depending on the type of waste. So by removing plastic from the waste stream from councils, what you're doing is actually removing a source of revenue from the councils, which is going to put your council tax up.
Yeah, exactly. So, whereas actually we could just support schools.
Or we could just support schools, right? And life would be easier. So yeah, it is a very complex problem. And one of the things that as a local authority, local authorities wish that manufacturers and packaging producers would think about their recycling systems before they engage in creating packaging. Because the way that rubbish arrives at a recycling centre, it's split out into lorries. So you've got waste, you've got recycling, you've got food waste typically. The recycling goes away and gets sorted because you put your cardboard and your plastic and what have you together. There are machines that can do it, but it'd be so much easier for the machines if the packaging told the machine what it was.
Yeah.
So that it would know how to separate it out really quickly, rather than having to look at it, go, that is cardboard, right, I'm going to take that and put it over here. If the packaging had already been able to tell the machinery, this is what I am, you can speed the machinery up so much faster and you can recycle more things. Yeah. And like I was saying earlier on, there's about 25% of the waste that goes through the waste stream that can't be recycled. And a lot of that is actually because the machines don't know what it is. So it might be plastic that's covered in food, so it can't identify this is plastic, this is food, so it can't tell the difference between it. So it ends up in general waste and it ends up in landfill.
Yeah.
If the packaging was telling the machine, actually, by the way, I'm plastic, it would take it away, it could get washed, and then it can go away and be recycled. But at the moment it goes to general waste, it goes to landfill because the machines can't tell what it is. So, one of the great things about connected packaging should be, that it's able to communicate with local authority recycling centres all around the world to tell the recycling centre, this is what I am.
Mm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because if they can identify that, then the job of what needs to happen to it next is predefined. So
and there are only sort of 4 or 5 companies in the world that set up these recycling centres. So actually giving that thought and then going to those businesses and saying, by the way, right, we've just produced this new type of packaging, this is what it is. Great, thanks. Put that into the computer. All the machines now know that's exactly what that is. This is how it can be recycled. This is where it goes. Brilliant, job done. So that sort of stuff is actually really easy to sort out. We just need to choose to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to touch on IoT. I was going to talk about smart packaging, connected packaging. Only a few minutes left, and it's the Connected Packaging Summit, Gregor. What about other ideas? Is there anything else you can see where the integration of connected technologies can support in terms of sustainability goals? Anything there that you can mention in terms of creating or helping consumers, education?
Look, so I think the things that I would say to this one is we need to put in place a set of principles that everybody signs up, that talks about packaging and how packaging is going to get through the entire life cycle so that it can be recycled. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of initiatives sound like a really great idea, but when you start thinking about how they're going to go into practice, they cause much bigger problems down the road. I'll give you an example. Coca-Cola have started doing the lid that recycles with the bottle.
Yeah.
Okay, so you unscrew the cap and it kind of hangs on. It's still attached.
Caps. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem with them is they still have those little jagged edges on them, and depending on your size, when you take a swig of it, it pokes you in the eye. So what they've done is they've created a great packaging solution. It makes sense. We can be recycled together. Great idea. But if you are between the ages of roughly 5 and 13, every time you take a drink, you're going to poke yourself in the eye with the cap. That has created a much bigger problem than the one that it has tried to solve. So we need to put in place some principles that will help guide to make sure that we don't create bigger issues down the road. I love connected packaging. I love packaging that can tell a recycling centre what it is. I love packaging that can help individuals in their homes drive different behaviour and make sure that products do get recycled. I love initiatives like TerraCycle have been doing that recycle things that nobody has thought of recycling before, because there's so much stuff that basically ends up in landfill purely because nobody has thought, how can we recycle this? And yet it's made it to landfill because either an individual or a business has thrown it away.
Yeah.
So we have to start thinking through some of these cycles, right? Everything that ends up in waste has been used in some way, shape, or form before. So the question is, how do we get it to that point again?
Yeah.
Somebody very clever is going to say, well, what about animal waste and what about ashes? Animal waste can be recycled. It can be put in with food waste and it can be used to generate energy. Ash, so the stuff that's burnt wood and charcoal in your barbecue and stuff like that, it gets taken away and it can be added into concrete. So it can be used to create buildings. It can be used as aggregate. Everything that ends up in waste has been used in some way, shape, or form before. We need to think about how we can do it again.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point there. There are uses for it. There just needs to be channels set up to be able to do so. Makes great sense. Going back to the tethered caps, also having working in the packaging industry, I knew tethered caps was coming, and I was super surprised that a couple of different times I've seen people rip the cap off because they think this is a batch of not properly produced caps and they just rip them off, and I'm like, I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. So it's education as well, education of what's this for, what am I supposed to do with it, where am I supposed to recycle it, You know, if ash can be used as something else, well, why do we not have a collection stream for that? Why is there not something there that's set up? You know, that seems to be.
I mean, a lot of it is there a market to do it? So there is a market for recycled paper. There is a market for recycled glass. There isn't currently a market for recycled ash. You know, people don't want to buy it. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be, but what we need is creative people to think about what could this be turned into. A bit like TerraCycle with the toothpaste tubes, we could turn these into play parks. A bit like, you know, my council with plastic bottles, we can turn these into curbstones. Here is a business that's able to do it. We can turn them into park benches. We can turn them into other things once their usable life as a bottle has ended. There are things you can do with it. But somebody needs to create that market, and it's going to need some of those breakthrough ideas to get us to that point. Just, you know, people like that sort of 13, 14-year-old kid just going, we should just have three sizes, small, medium, and large. Brilliant. Boom. Yeah, what a great idea. But it's come from somebody that isn't tied up with the supply chain. They aren't tied up with the commercial reality. They aren't tied up with the politics that you were bringing up. It's just somebody going, actually, this would be a much better idea. Yes, it would. You're absolutely right. You know, but how do we make it happen? That's an issue, but it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. Yeah, no, definitely. There's two quick comments from the audience, and I just want to quickly get to them, even though we have run out of time. Interesting discussion on refillables. Is there any food categories that are better or worse for refilling? So cereals have tried it in a number of different ways, but it's been mostly niche manufacturers. Washing detergent has done very well with it. So people like Ecommerce and some of the others, they have found ways of being able to provide shops with large containers that can be refilled, but it doesn't tend to be the big supermarket chains that are doing it. So I think manufacturers are able to find capability, but the retailers are sometimes the ones that are putting the challenges in place. Because like we said earlier, the weight of the item, the receptacle that you're putting it in is going to affect the price potentially that you end up paying for the product. Yeah, most definitely. And then the last comment from Tina was to say that indeed the school's idea is very fantastic and should be implemented. So we have run out of time. Thank you so much, Gregor. We're finishing up this little session, but it was absolutely captivating. Great expertise that you have, and thank you for sharing that with us and inspiring us to think about things differently. You're very welcome. It was great to be with you all. Thanks a lot. Thanks very much, Gregor. So we'll be back in just 60 seconds. I will be joined by Virginia Muriel. She is Sustainability Manager at Garcia Carrion, and she is going to be discussing packaging as a pathway to a sustainable future. Don't go away, and see you very soon.